Hi there everybody, it's Ed from Clear Prezzo here, and I'm here to give you my presentation on how to pitch at a startup weekend, coronavirus edition. First of all, I'm probably definitely going to have to take this mask off because it's about 1,000 degrees under there, which is far too long for the video. I was going to give it a try, but on mature reflection, it's not going to work. So the organizers of this great event wanted me to pitch in on kind of what my tips and tricks are for pitching your idea at the end of all this, because I've helped out at about 10 to 15 startup weekends around the world. So I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't work, and hopefully these 4 tips will set you on the right track to really doing justice to explaining what your great idea is. So let's go for it. The alternative title to this presentation is that nobody cares about your idea until you make them. This is very true. You care about your idea greatly, but to a first-time viewer of the video you put together, there's a high chance that they won't care. And your job in that 4 minutes is to put forward a compelling case as to why they should. So there's a quote from a guy called Tom Peters that I like, which is "The packaging counts a lot in a crowded world." And truth be told, you're going to be operating in a crowded world where lots of different people have ideas for different projects, different businesses, different startups. And the way that you package what you are is as important as what it is that you actually do. So the first tip is to lead with the problem and not the technology. Now, I know that's hard for some to take, but in my opinion, until people care about what you do, they're not going to care about how you do it. So a good example of a problem statement is put forward by this guy. So Jake Mendel currently works for Silicon Valley Bank, but he used to have a medical technology startup himself. And what he did right up front in the pitch is have a very specific and powerful problem statement to get people hooked. So he's pitching the problem, not necessarily exactly how it's done. So here's how he does it. He says that 75% of the 1 million plus annual biopsies for prostate cancer produce inconclusive results. So that's a problem. Why is it a problem? This results in a $4 billion loss for the healthcare system and 8% of patients being hospitalized for complications. So very good problem statement, and a lot of heavy lifting being done in what takes about 10 to 20 seconds to say. So what we can see here are different things. So first of all, we can see the scale of the problem. It's a big problem. We can see what the problem area is. So it's cancer, which is very important. We can tell what the specific problem is, and that's around the validity and conclusivity of results. And then we can tell things like, how much money is the industry losing and what's the human cost of this problem. So there's a lot of heavy lifting being done in this problem statement, and it's something to aspire to fit in that level of detail. And time is short, so that's the sort of thing you're going to have to do. I like this quote from Dave McClure on the matter, and he says that when you're pitching your problem, you want it to be pitched as a painkiller, because vitamins are nice to have. People know they should probably take them, but they're not sure. Whereas painkillers are must-haves. They're extremely obvious that you need them, and probably obvious that you'd be more than likely to pay for it. So when you're pitching your problem, try and make sure that you are assuring people that what you have is something that people know they need. One way to do this, or one way to get across your before and after, your problem and then solution, is a visual like this. And this is what Intercom used to use to show that, before it used to be this really messy, complicated process to actually chat with your customers. But with our thing, we make it really easy. We make it, a one-stop shop to connect you and your customer. But if you had spare time and you could come up with, an image file like this, try and find a way of editing it in, and I think that'll do a lot of the explaining of the problem for you, and maybe you can use less actual words. So the second tip, related to the first, is to pitch what your idea does, not necessarily what it is. So, I often say that it isn't the solution if by it you mean what the thing is comprised of. So if we look at a car, when we sell a car, we're not really selling it like this. We're not selling it in terms of tires and suspension springs and, steering wheel and glass sheets. That's not the way we're selling it. We're selling it as a what it does. And the solution in this case is that, it used to take you a day to get from point A to point B on your horse. But with our thing, called a car, you'll be able to get there in an hour. So you'll be way quicker. You'll be able to bring more stuff with you because our car is actually literally many horsepower. And if you choose the right one, you look really cool and people will be really impressed with you. So, What you're pitching here is the benefits, both functional and psychological, as opposed to exactly how your idea achieves that. You can go into more detail about how it actually does it maybe in the demo or in a Q&A, but for the purposes of a 4-minute pitch, there's only so much exactly how you can explain. So I think something like this offers a structure that you could follow to express what your problem and solution is. So I think it's something as simple as: we help insert target customer, achieve desired outcome benefit by, and then you insert your unique selling point here. So something like that gets across a good deal of information. You would be surprised how many people I see pitch for 4 or 5 minutes and kind of not touch on any of these areas. They'll talk about their team, they'll talk about the market, but by the end of it, they've never really talked about exactly who their customers are. They've never really talked about exactly what specific outcome they can help people achieve. And they haven't talked about how they are unique versus the competition. So if you can put something simple like this together, you're going to have explained a lot of what people will want to know. The third tip is to use plain English. So a lot of times people feel that it's the smart thing to do to use complex terms and jargon and multi-syllabic words that make sense to you, but they might not make sense to your audience. So where possible, use plain English. And I think examples of plain English can be found on homepages of websites. They're really good examples of it. So 2 I have in mind are, the first is an Irish startup called teamwork.com, and on their homepage they say that they are work management software that lets your team do more. So very simple, very plain English, but very descriptive. And their subhead is very good also, which is: Teamwork is a work and project management tool that helps team improve collaboration, visibility, accountability, and ultimately results. So I think that's a great secondary line to explain what they do. Another great example is from, yet again, another great Irish company called One Page CRM. And the way they pitch their product is that they help you unleash your salespeople. So note, they don't tell you how yet, but they're pitching the benefit that you can expect from using them. Their subhead is that they are rocket-fueled CRM software for agencies, IT companies, and real estate companies, and more. So again, they're kind of naming specific types of customers who typically find great value in their product or service. So not a complex word on the screen, not much over 2 syllables anywhere, but does a lot of communication. A good rule is that if you are using a word that has to be Googled, then it's not very good for the purposes of simple communications. So an example of that, and you might have seen this image going around the internet this week, is the difference between vague language and vivid language, as this person puts it, or I'd probably put it clear and simple language. And we've seen this phrase a lot in the last few weeks and days, which is social distancing. And we hear people saying you must practice social distancing. But the term is very vague, and I don't think people really know exactly what it means. It's a new term that people hadn't heard until a few months ago. And as they say here, it's conceptual. On the other hand, you could use things that are clear and more vivid. So if you want someone to understand something, make it as simple as possible. So in this case, rather than saying practice social distancing, we would say stay at home and shop once a week. Nice and simple, not much ambiguity, and not many ways that someone could misunderstand that. So we're using a known term, it's specific, and it's visual. So just bear in mind, when you're explaining what your product or service is that you're proposing, make sure it's on the more clear end of the scale as opposed to the vague end of the scale. So my fourth and final tip is around validation, a very important stage of the process and ideally done early and often. And validation, I suppose, is just a fancy word for talking to people, getting out there and making those, Zoom calls, phone calls, text interchanges, something where you can communicate with the target customer that you have in mind. Because when you talk to people, you'll often learn things that you never would have come up with in your own head. So get out there and start validating early. Ideally, one of the early things you'll find out is that people need what you're making. If you ask them various questions and you find out that they don't need it, then you should probably stop making it. The second thing, I should say, you should pivot. The second thing then is ideally they'll give you indications that if you made this thing and it was fully functional, that they pay for it, because that's what makes a business a business. So in your pitch, in that 4-minute pitch, what you're going to want to get across is hopefully both of those things, that we spoke to people and X amount of them said they needed it and Y% of them said they'd pay, A, B, or C dollars per month. So that's what we want to get out of talking to real people. So I like the thoughts of Joanna Wiebe on the matter. So she runs a company called copyhackers.com, and she said that when you do validation, what you get to hear is the voice of the customer. And the voice of the customer helps you do a few things. So firstly, when you hear customers talk very specifically about their problems and the features services that they like, it can allow you to really tailor what you're making to match those things. And the second thing that she says is that when you find out the tone and voice that people use when talking about their problems, that can actually help you guide the tone and voice you give to your brand. It can help you come up with the way that you actually phrase things, the way you name, features. When you hear people's real discussion of their problem, you're going to come up with stuff that you just wouldn't have come up with by yourself. So just before I wrap things up, it's worth pointing out that you should take a look at what the judging criteria are and probably allow that to influence how you phrase and package your concept at the end of all this. So the 5 areas they say that they're judging you on are: have you adequately explained the problem and the impact? Have you been able to execute and design something approaching an MVP? Is your idea or concept original? Is it feasible? Have you proven that this can actually happen? And what is the business model behind it all? Have you proven that it can either be financially profitable or at least financially sustainable? So those are the things that they're going to be marking you on. So just make sure that you don't omit one or more of those areas, because then that really kind of hamstrings you right from the beginning. So just make sure all those 5 areas are touched upon, at least somewhat. So that's pretty much it. They are the 4 tips that I think if you can take care of all those, you'll be in a really good place in that 4-minute pitch. To recap, the first tip was to lead with the problem, not the technology. The second tip was to pitch what it does, not what it is. The third tip is to use plain English. And the fourth tip is to validate, validate, validate. So that's that, guys. That's all I have for you. I'm looking forward to seeing how this online version of Startup Weekend works out for you. I'm looking forward to seeing the pitches. And if we ever needed proper innovation, it's at a time like this. So good luck and have a great time at the Startup Weekend.